Hello and welcome back. Transportation from market to market and mechanization of the factory system. Today we're going to be looking at changes in how things were done and goods were transported during the Industrial Revolution. How did transportation play an important role during the Industrial Revolution? If products and materials could not be moved quickly and cheaply, the cost would become too high, as we've looked at in England and in France, especially with all the tariffs and the poorly built roads. It took forever to get stuff to get places. But with changes in transportation, you're going to see how the Industrial Revolution is able to explode. The ability to access huge amounts of raw materials was also important. Without the supplies, there was no way to produce things. What were the road transportation conditions like in England in the 1700s? They sucked. They were very poor. Many roads were still medieval. That basically means they were just paths carved out of the woods with two wheel well things. You know, if you go out in the middle of the bush in British Columbia fishing or hunting or exploring on a camping trip, you see those ones that just have the two wheels going through it. That's essentially what it was. There's no such things as roads. And what happens is they had to use animals to carry all this stuff, and the roads are so poor that many animals actually broke their legs and things like that. So a lot of people didn't like to do that. All right, describe how the roads began to become better. Well, the turnpike system was developed. It is when a private company builds and maintains a road and charges a toll to travel on it. Basically, it's a private company that charges people a toll to use the road. It's kind of like the BC government did with the new Port Mann Bridge. They put a toll on it, charge it, but what happened under the turnpike system was private people, so they could charge pretty much whatever they wanted. There was no cost to the government, so they encouraged it. Think about it. The government didn't have to pay for roads. Hey, all the better to it. Let these other guys do it. James McAdam was one of the most successful builders of this time. He used a three-layered system: large stones on the bottom, fine granite from quarries on top. With the new roads, regular travel began, leading to the industrialization. Other transportation systems were developed. The use of canals was important. The canals carried raw materials in large quantities to the industrial cities, reducing the cost of goods by 3/4. Railways also began to play an important role. Once the steam engine was invented, machines could be used to transport large quantities of material. In 1829, George and Robert Stephenson built a rocket which could travel at a whole whopping 39 kilometers an hour. By the mid-1800s, railways were being built all over Europe and North America. What we have to understand about the canals is what the original canals would be built and dug, and the farmers or whoever was transporting the goods would walk down the sides of the canals using their animals to actually pull the barges and things like that. But once the steam engine comes in, they're able to transport up and down the canals by motor. How were goods made and sold before the Industrial Revolution? How was the cottage industry important to Britain? Many products were built in cottages and sold there as well. This cottage industry still exists today in many parts of the world. What it is they didn't have a Walmart, they didn't have a store to go to buy clothes. A lot of the times they had to make clothes. And when they made clothes, they sometimes made extra, and what the extra clothes that they would make, they'd sell. And that is usually women in the evening after dinner's been done, the farming chores have been done. They sit there and they knit and they make clothes, and then they sell the clothes as a second source of income. It was important because it was the root of the textile industry. They spun and weaved much of the textile, and it was from here that new technology was developed. Capitalists began to buy goods from these people, and eventually the demand became too great for them to keep up. An advantage of the cottage system would people who work from home, but the disadvantages would be the distractions of working at home. You guys know what it's like when you're at home trying to do homework and everything around you is a distraction. Many of these people were poorly paid for the long hours it took, and clothers were able to lower the price of goods because there were an abundance of people making clothes or willing to make them. So in other words, the more people that wanted to make money in the cottage industry meant the prices that the companies had to pay went lower because there was more demand. There was more people making it for them. How did it change society? Well, the factory age created vast cities with factory workers living in large housing developments. This was a complete change because before they used to live on farms. Now they're all living in housing developments in the cities. The system made Britain wealthy, but it was also brutally hard on its people. People had to relocate to the cities in order to find work. Richard Arkwright built factories that contained all the different processes that were needed to produce the material all under one roof, therefore reducing the production costs, and in order to keep prices down and profits up, the factories paid minimal salaries. The workers cannot complain for fear of losing their jobs. Remember laissez-faire economics when there is no government controls. Therefore, they could keep the wages down. By Arkwright basically putting the loom and the spinning jennies all into one big factory, he no longer had to source out and bring goods in from the cottage industry, cutting down on transportation costs because it was all right there ready to go. What were the conditions like for children? Brutal. Just face it, it was brutal. Children were forced to do many of the dangerous jobs. Their size allowed them to go between machines, get into areas that adults could not. This led to generations of adults who have had little education in various industries as a result of accidents. So basically what would happen is children, by the time they get 5 years old, the family needed them to work, so they'd go to work, and because they were so small and the factory machines were so big, they were able to get into places. And unfortunately, once you get inside a machine and you fix it, it sometimes start working, and if you're not in the way or you're not paying attention, you could easily lose a limb or lose your life. What is the factory age? New inventions made the cottage industry obsolete because machines made it easier to produce goods, and people would have to work in buildings that house the machines and contain the power source, hence the factory. What were the factory acts? They were laws that were put limitations on working hours, conditions, and age restrictions. Social reformers from the upper class felt that the poor people needed help. Yes, the poor people needed help. The poorer workers also tried to develop the guild system and try and protect themselves. They were eventually successful to agree. However, the middle and many upper class people believed the lower class had to work hard or they'd slip into evil during their free time. In other words, the Puritan mentality. Yes, everything they do is evil, so control every aspect of their lives. You have to understand also the early guild systems were the first forms of unions. Thank you very much, and the assignment will be given to you guys in class on Monday.